Congratulations. Call to order the Salem Planning Commission meeting for February 25th. Jennifer, would you please call the roll?
Commissioner Pop? Here. Commissioner Fryback?
Here.
Commissioner Heller?
Here.
Commissioner Larnakis?
Here.
Commissioner Rhodes is absent. Commissioner Slater?
Here.
Commissioner Tech? Here. Commissioner Truitt?
Here.
Commissioner Mirabel?
Here.
We have quorum.
All right, first we'll move on to public comment. Is there anyone here who would like to speak to an agenda item? All right, then we'll move on to the consent calendar and approval of the minutes.
I would move that we approve the minutes from the January 28th, 2025 meeting. All right, there will be some discussion on this motion.
All right, is there a second?
I'll second it.
Second, Commissioner Fryback. Is there any discussion? Yes, Commissioner Fryback.
Yeah, I'd like to move to then, see item 8, to read, that Commissioner Laura Minkiff is now part of the Transportation Subcommittee, joining Commissioners Tev, Fryback, and Slater.
Thank you for that. Is there any other discussion? We need a motion to, I assume we need a motion, no? Just vote on it. All right, assuming that we're all okay with that, I'm looking for objections. I'm not seeing objections, we will go ahead then and take a vote on the minutes.
Commissioner Pop? Aye. Commissioner Fryback?
Aye.
Commissioner Heller?
Abstain.
Commissioner Larnakis?
Aye.
Commissioner Slater?
Aye.
Commissioner Tev? Aye. Commissioner Truitt?
Aye.
Commissioner Mirabel?
All right, motion passes. Thank you, gavel. We don't have any public hearings today, but we do have some special orders of business, which is a presentation on the capital improvement plan. So I will turn it over to staff. I'm very excited to hear about this.
Thank you, Commissioners. I'll kick things off. My name is Alan Dannon. I'm the city engineer at the Public Works Department. Last year, we were here at the very beginning of May, giving an overview of the CIP. So we're here quite a bit earlier in the process this time. I'd say last time the cake was pretty big. This time the ingredients are in the bowl. We're mixing them up, but we're earlier on in the process for sure. What we're going to focus on tonight is kind of the public works components of the CIP, which make up the bulk of it. So that's what the presentation will focus on. But it also will include IT facilities and some other categories like that when we get to the final adoption point. So that's just something to keep in mind. If you have questions in those categories, we can field them, try to answer them, or bring information back if you need. But our focus tonight will be mostly on public works. After Tammy goes through her presentation, the next steps in the process will finish development of the CIP with all those other categories. We'll present it to the finance committee, and then take it to the budget committee, and then also to city council for adoption in June. So that's what happens after this. I'd like to turn it over to Tammy Stars, our engineering admin manager, who is the public works key person for developing the CIP. So she's got a short presentation for you.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Good evening. I'm gonna go ahead and share. Make sure I do this correctly. Okay, so let's get. There we go. So I just want to always start when I give the CIP presentation with what our purpose is, and that's to create a transparent CIP process. We establish risk-based priority lists. We match that priority list to limited resources in a thoughtful and responsible manner. And we consult with an internal CIP committee per council policy C9. This year, we've taken action and we've revised all our scoring criteria to better reflect our infrastructure categories, to where before we had, it was more We use the same criteria for almost every category, but now we separated it by water, sewer, storms, parks, transportation. And all criteria, every project has a 100-point maximum. Before we didn't have that. We've updated a lot of our project estimates this year for R&R projects, mostly for our, that's piping in the ground. We held strategic meetings to prioritize those high dollar, high priority projects, and we began those funding discussions. We programmed funding based on our workload resources, and we automated the CIP request form on the city website, and that's gonna go live in March, which I think will be a lot easier for citizens to submit CIP request forms. So excited about that. Our highlights this year, we have 153 projects programmed. That number will go up once we add IT, facilities, and I think one other department. Right now, we have $353 million programmed. We added 25.2 million for those priority projects. And we have 24.1 million in replacement and rehabilitation, our program development over 5 years for our older infrastructure. Our funding, we have rate transfers of 153.6 million over 5 years. That was reduced some, I'll share with that later. In years 4 and 5, those years aren't fully programmed, those rate transfers, we're just setting that aside in anticipation of funding some higher priority projects, and we're holding back about 10 million that hasn't been programmed. We have about 27 million in SDCs, those are system development charges. We have 112 million funded of the 2022 safety and livability bond, 51.8 million in state and federal grants, and 25.1 million in urban renewal agency funding, and about 8.8 million in developer delivered projects. Some of our key projects in parks is the Bailey Ridge Park Development Project, the Fisher Road Park. We have quite a bit of money going into the Riverfront Park electrical improvements. The Gear Park Shelter, Sports Field, and Dog Park, that's part of the bond. And we're also doing the skate park this year. And then the Bush Pasture Park, the maintenance building. Transportation, we have the two new ones that we have, those are Safe Routes to Schools projects, Leslie Middle School and Market at 15. We have the 2025 payment R&R, that's another bond project that's going to be going out to bid soon. We continue on the Gilchrist corridor improvements, phase 2 just bid. We had a nice bid come in, like 30% under the engineer's estimate, so that was really nice. And then we have the Mildred Street development reimbursement project. Urban renewal, we're seeing less funding coming in on those tax increment funding.
Tammy, can I interrupt you for just 1 second? Can you tell me, you talk about rate transfer, I think I know what that is, but can you tell me what that is? And
That's the utility rate transfer. So that's for water, sewer, and storm.
so those are funds that the city receive and then become available for capital
utilities,
funds,
for capital.
utility improvement fund. And what is the Mildred Street developer reimbursement project?
Yes,
What does the
that
developer reimbursement mean?
the developer is designing and constructing that street improvement, and we reimburse them for eligible costs when they're increasing capacity. Then they're eligible for those system development charges reimbursement, and a portion of it could be all, or a portion of it could be reimbursed.
Thank you.
I do want to go back to point out parks and transportation when we talk about funding, because parks, the only funding we have for parks is either system development charges or grants. There's no other funding source coming in. I mean, there's some we could get donations, you know, like the Eco Earth Ball that's in the budget is donations. But transportation is another one of those where it's either a state or federal grant or a small portion of gas tax or the bond. Otherwise, there's no other real funding source. So our utility rates for our utility is a great source, but for parks and transportation and even urban renewal now, we just don't have great sources of revenue. Key projects in stormwater is the 16th Street culvert replacement, the Chambers swell at Bailey Ridge Park. Another new one is McGillcrest culvert at Clark Creek. And Center Street storm drain replacement and the Deer Haven culvert replacement. And then moving more into our utility at Willow Lake, we're gonna replace a chiller in the administration building. Do some repairs on the outfall diffuser and continue to work on the clarifier improvements. In water, we have funding in there for the Francis Reservoir liner and cover replacement that's reached the end of its useful life. And then we have the Guerin Island filters resanding program. We got it in this year. I believe there's 8 filters that need to be sanded on an annual basis. We're gonna resand one each year. The Guerin Island flow maintenance, the Marine Drive water line, that's part of the bond project, as well as the Portland Road water line replacement, that's part of the bond project. And then wastewater, we have the Center Street brick sewer. And unfortunately, I cannot see, my eyes are into that last one, I can't see that, sorry about that. Fisher Road sewer main, that's part of the bond project. Waldo Wildwind, pipe rehab. The West Salem Forest Main evaluation and repair, and the Forest Main evaluation program. So those are just some of the key projects that are in this upcoming capital improvement plan. So this is the allocation by infrastructure, so it still is missing those IT and other departments in here, but it's 353 million, and this is just how it's spread through the 5 years of the plan. And you can see where transportation is dropping off in the last 2 years. So this year we've had some real challenges. In the utility, we had some reductions in the utility rate transfers. In year 1, it was reduced by 4.5 million, and in year 2, by 2 million. And our solution to that is to continue to analyze our budgets and program funding based on our priorities and our staffing resources. And then another challenge was the number of high dollar priority projects. And we continue to prioritize, plan, and begin scoping those projects. We have a lot of aging infrastructure. We continue to plan and program appropriate funding for rehabilitation and replacement of that aging infrastructure. And right now we have 566 unfunded issues, and those are what we would call, what would turn into a project. So that's what's in the database. We have probably hundreds more that aren't in the database, but that's what's currently in the database. And
Can I ask a question about that one as well? Sorry to interrupt you. That number really interests me. Do we have any idea of what the economic value of those 566 projects are?
I could come back, it's probably billions, probably billions,
Billions.
yeah.
So what is your kind of collective assessment of the city's capacity to stay on top of providing the basic kind of utility services that we do? I mean, are we gonna get to 5 years, we're gonna have a crises? Are we on top of it? Are we going at the right pace in terms of keeping on top of maintaining our utility facilities? And I ask because I've just been in a couple countries that had very poor public facilities, and this has kind of risen to the top of my mind.
You can take that one.
I'm gonna let
I would say it's not, it's kind of somewhere in the middle of the spectrum that you outlined. We have a lot of aging infrastructure, as Tammy pointed out. And even if you just took a rough metric like, hey, we want to replace 1% of our pipelines per year, because like a ductile iron water pipeline, you can reasonably expect to maybe get 100 years of life out of it, right? So if you're turning over 1% of the system every year, that's a rough way to look at it. That would require us to be investing somewhere in like the 30 to 40 million range per year, just in pipe replacement, right? So we're not keeping up with that demand. Now, what we are doing is we are setting aside money every year in the utility to rehab and replace pipes in all three: stormwater, wastewater, and water. To try to get the worst of the worst and keep service going, but you'll notice like in the news this year, we had some high profile failures, and that's because of the condition of our infrastructure continues to deteriorate. And so what that means is your focus with the money that we do have goes towards more and more critical needs and less preventative, more and more reactive. But I'd say that's the situation now, right, with the funding that we have.
But with SDC charges, we have the ability to pay for what's being developed. So we're not using current funds to pay for new development. We're using the current funds to pay for improving and maintaining existing infrastructure. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's by and large, that's correct, is our utility rate revenues will go towards maintaining our existing infrastructure. We're building very few new mains, new pipelines, that's mostly being done by private development. And then those expenses are reimbursable to some degree by system development charges, depending on their eligibility, the sizing of them compared to base needs.
So our current ratepayers are not paying for growth. Growth is paying for itself here on the utility side of things, by and large.
I don't, that's a big leap, but the utility rate revenues go towards base needs, and I think the private development is paying for all the expansion of the system with the assistance from system.
I'll take that. Oh, since I opened it up for questions, I foolishly opened it up for questions. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. President. So my question is brief, which is, how much of our existing infrastructure is, in your words, critical?
I don't have a hard number for you. I can tell you that we have lots of pipe in the ground that's over 100 years old. Some of it's still made of wood. We have sewer pipe that's made out of clay. So there's a lot of really old pipe in the ground. Sometimes that's okay, right? It's in the ground, it's in a stable condition, and it's doing the job that it needs to do. So again, that's why we focus on where we know problems are emerging. Hopefully we get them before they emerge to the surface, like happened with the West Salem Force Mains right after Christmas, but that's our focus. And just this year, in fact, last night at City Council, we got authorization for 2 projects that we had to elevate for urgency. One was a failing brick sewer line in Center Street, and another was the Walpole Wildwood project that Tammy mentioned in South Salem, where we had a failure that caused backups in homes. So those are the kind of things that we're dealing with, and it's a significant portion of the system, not more than half, but significant. Sorry, I don't have a more specific answer. Thank you.
Any follow-up?
Just a comment, and thank you for the efforts of Public Works. I live in West Salem, was where walk through bases.
Commissioner Friday.
Yeah, I had a question about the seismic vulnerability of our water and wastewater system. I attended a presentation by Portland Water Bureau, and they talked about how they managed to future-proof a lot of their pressure water mains and storm system. Kind of done that, or is there plans to do that?
Yeah, so we have done study work on our system to look at its resiliency and prioritize where we want to invest, or to see where we should prioritize investments to boost our resiliency. We certainly have vulnerabilities in the system. We have old reservoirs that were built before current seismic standards are in place. We have old cast iron pipes that are vulnerable in a seismic event. Our resiliency focus will be to kind of focus on the core system to make sure we maintain storage and transmission through the system, and then the distribution kind of comes later, right? So at least if we have water available in centralized areas, that's better than losing the entire system. So that's kind of our focus works. We've got work to do. One of the projects in the CIP right now is the Fairmont Reservoir, which would be seismically stabilizing that. That's one of the 2 key reservoirs in our biggest service area. Pressure zone, as we call them. There's different pressure zones in the system depending on elevation. It's in the biggest one, and so that will be one of the first ones that we do because it serves the greatest area and gives us the greatest sort of benefit on our investment for resilience.
Okay. Yeah, thanks.
All right, thank you.
Okay. Okay, so like I said, we held a lot of strategic meetings on our utility this year, and we talked about those high dollar, high priority projects within the 3 utility infrastructure categories. And what came out of that, these were the highest priorities. Some of them are funded partially, some of them are fully funded. Some of them we need to continue discussions on how to fund them, because pay as you go, they're just too expensive. So we have the Franzen Reservoir Cover and Liner, the Bennett Dam Complex, the Detroit Water Supply Mitigation, Guerin Island Flow Maintenance, the Restanding Program at Guerin Island, Forest Main Evaluation Program, the West Salem Forest Main Evaluation and Repair, and then the Water Transmission Line. So those are some of our key projects that we will continue to work on, plan, evaluate, and find funding for.
So those are the unfunded
So
priority projects.
no, they're
Those are
either
the funded.
partially or fully funded, so I can tell you Franzen Reservoir in years 1 and 2, about 8 million, and it's about a $33 million project. So Bennett Dam is a $35 million project, and there's $1 million programmed. Detroit Water, not sure about that price, it's anywhere from 5 to 8 million, and we've got about 500,000 programmed. Flow maintenance is programmed, fully programmed. I think it is about 3.2 million. The restanding program for the first 5 years is fully programmed at 7.6 million. The forest main evaluation, that's fully programmed. And the West Salem Forest Main, we programmed it to evaluate. And then we'll come back next year and probably put more money in if needed. And then the water transmission line is programmed for about 500,000 to begin looking at that again.
And if I could just tag on to that, so our approach here is we know some of these projects are really critical, they speak to the resiliency that we were talking about before and making sure that our water supply and transmission into town are secure and reliable. And we know that the numbers that it takes to fund those, we can't do with just the annual capital transfer every year that we were talking about right off the top. So our approach has been to put a little bit of money in the budget so that we can better understand what the project is, what the scope of it is, what the design requirements will be, permitting, schedule, et cetera, so that we know, okay, we're gonna do this project, this is what the cash flow out looks like. Then we can evaluate what are the funding strategies to deal with it, are there grants out there, borrowing against existing utility revenue, those options, so that we can tackle these high priority needs. And this is our way of making progress against those instead of them just kind of sitting up there and continuing to not be addressed. Thank you.
That is the end of my presentation.
That was eye-opening. Thank you. I really appreciate you walking us through all of that, and I'll turn it over to questions. Commissioner Bureau Rendell.
Yes, actually, one question just about the airport, the allocation goes from, a little over 8 million down to 500,000 and then back up to 8 million for 2030, and it just seems like an unusual pattern. I'm just curious what drives that.
Those are federal projects that grants from FAA. And so that 8 million at the end of the 5th year is for a pavement rehabilitation, a very large pavement rehabilitation project.
Okay, I wondered if that was part of it, which leads me to my second question. I thought I remembered that the city council voted to close the second runway, or that's a discussion that is going on right now.
It's going on right now, but these projects are taxiway adaptations.
Oh, so this is not the runways at all, okay. And then if we do close that runway, I mean, is that gonna change sort of the assessment of what the airport's gonna cost, and do we have plans to, reallocate that land? We open that up, I mean, I'm just very curious.
I don't have answers to those questions, I don't think that decision is made yet, but I can say that what is airport property will likely stay airport property, and whatever it's, that facility's boundary is kind of set and designated for airport use, so we'll remain that way. Thank you.
Other questions? Good, Commissioner Brennan.
I know you touched on it briefly, but you mentioned the funding for transportation drops off pretty significantly. Now, 2026, we start at 19 million, and by 2030, we're putting 2 million into the system. Can you talk a little bit more about what the hole is?
Some of that is due to COVID and inflation, and when SCATS, the Salem Kaiser Transportation Plan, for a couple of years, they weren't giving out grants. So we're just getting back into that cycle, so next year you might see some of those grants coming back in that 4th and 5th year. So we weren't able to submit applications for that, and then also the gas tax drops off for capital construction in those last couple of years. And that's the match money that we use to get those grants.
Then I had a follow-up question. You mentioned 566 unfunded issues, assuming that's inclusive of transportation. Are there any, we talked about water, critical stuff, are there any critical transportation unfunded needs?
I'm sure there are a lot of critical unfunded transportation needs. We did not have strategic meetings on those. Those typically have come up when we've looked at a bond.
Yeah, I'll tag on to that. As Tammy mentioned, a lot of our transportation funding is sort of opportunity based on what kind of grant opportunities are out there. The other major funding mechanism is through bonds like the 2022 safety and livability bond. And so the process that goes to develop that project list is what kind of is, that's where they take a look at the overall need in the system and try to, hit a little bit of every sector and spread it everything around town. I would say so one of the biggest areas of sort of unfunded need in our system is pavement that has deteriorated sort of past the point of being rehabilitated with inlays or more less costly restoration methods, and they're reaching the point of deteriorating where they need to be fully rebuilt. And we just don't have funding for that. There's not only grant opportunities for that type of work, and so that's the biggest issue that I think we see in our transportation system is the quality of those pavements degrading over time and not really having the capital to bring them back up, and really not even having the capital to invest, just like I was talking about the utilities in that preventative maintenance earlier in their life. We just don't have enough to keep them at that level and prevent them down the downward curve of quality degrading. So that's, in my mind, one of the bigger issues with our transportation system, because it amounts to a lot of dollars. Like the cost to rebuild a street is big. So I think that's one area that we just don't have a good way to address. I think we've worked through grant opportunities to address, other modes of transportation, bicycle, pedestrian improvements. But there's certainly still opportunities there. Our system could be much more robust than it is. And we're just kind of taking advantage of the opportunities where we can. We have used some bond.
If I may, just real quick. Public Works did a great job outlining kind of the health of the transportation fund at the budget committee meeting on January 15th. Toward the end, there was a pretty in-depth look about the pavement condition. I know we're talking about capital projects, but just like Alan was saying, the preventative maintenance is so important for the life of those assets. So we really have to solve the maintenance problem before we can really address what we're doing in bonds and on the capital side. When we were developing the 2022 bond, if we had an appropriate level of maintenance, it could have looked a lot different. Doing more new streets and less reconstruction of current streets.
I have quite a few, but I was
We'll sort of get them on the same way.
yeah.
Commissioner Tab.
Thank you.
just have one for now, but on the culverts, I was curious if those are upgraded sizes or materials, or are they just replacing ones that are shot?
All of the above. Typically, most of the projects in here are culverts that are degrading to the point of failing and needing repair. We will upgrade materials and comply with fish passage requirements whenever we do this project, so it's a much improved situation.
So when you say improved, do you mean going from plastic to metal, or metal to plastic? Or something?
The most durable that we can, but a lot of times to meet fish passage requirements, it's actually more like concrete with an open bottom, so that it's more like a natural surface, so that's a common replacement, especially for larger culverts. Otherwise, smaller pipe replacements, we go with the most durable material that we can afford, often concrete or ductile iron, depending on the depth.
Thank you.
Other questions? All right.
Let's go to two.
Commissioner
Where we go?
Snyder's point so I just wanted to express my preference, like, I think I agree with you guys when you say we really need to preserve the existing system and kind of stray away from expanding it, and part of me here, I know we have a housing crisis, and I know we have all these other, horrible things going on, but if we do like a new greenfield development and a developer will build us, I don't know, a few thousand new linear feet of street or sewer or stormwater or, water line, that's water line in 100 years, we won't have the money to maintain. This, like, I don't know, it's just looming in the back. I won't be around for it, but I don't know, it's just stressful, and I don't know if there's like any outreach to the public that's being done, like, is public work on Joe Public, are we funding our infrastructure in 100 years if we don't approve some kind of new method of funding this? This is what your city's gonna look like.
Good question. I agree. It's occasionally stressful to think about how we're gonna deal with the new assets that are coming on top of the existing ones. I will say, that one of the things that does come with expanding our system is new customers on the system. So from a utility standpoint, there is some offset to the added needs for the utilities, new customers coming online and paying utility rates to help maintain that now. Like I mentioned, we've got a lot of aging infrastructure, but at least it's, there's some benefit that comes along with it for the utility side. From the transportation side, talking about the challenges there, it's certainly. I do think that we've seen a lot of infill type development because of little housing rules and that kind of thing, where taking advantage of some existing areas and bringing them up to some of their maximum potential. And I feel like that probably has lesser demand on the overall system than new greenfield developments that we're talking about. So I think that's been a positive in several years.
Yeah, I was wondering if you could talk a little bit more about like an infill, like say if you've got a single family home or a other structure, and say you're going from 2 households to 15, 16, 17, is that a net benefit for the city as far as streets, utilities, and other kinds of funding, or is the new burden from all these new residents creating a greater problem, or is it better for us financially?
Yeah, good question. I'll give you an example of a project that is happening right now. So we had a middle housing development come in that was basically taking a single lot that was larger, and I think putting 6 or 8 cottage type developments on it. And that was on a block that was served by a 2-inch water line, and like 8 or 10 other homes that were served off that single 2-inch water line, which is well inadequate even for the existing system, not to mention the the new coming in from that middle housing, so that created a problem. The good news is, like I mentioned, we set aside some money for rehab and rehabilitation in our budget every year because we knew that was happening and we didn't wanna sort of just say, well, no, you can't do it because the water line's not big enough. We were able to prioritize a little bit of that money because it doesn't cost very much. The grand scheme of things to replace a block of 2-inch water line with 8-inch water line that gives the whole neighborhood fire flow and service capacity that it needs, as well as these new homes. So we were able to plug a little bit of capital money in there. That helps that development go forward and benefits the neighborhood. So I think there can be situations like that where you get sort of a net positive effect. But certainly there's other times too where, you know, the additional demands just add to that maintenance and an operational backlog. I just wanted to throw that example out there because it was kind of fresh in my mind.
So let me jump in a second here, just to follow up a little bit. I mean, in the utility world, kind of density and expanse and size matter, because you're really paying by feet as we develop things. So when I look at kind of our pattern of putting large like warehouses, manufacturing facilities at external edges of the city, that's more expensive because we're running lines out. I realize that the developers are paying for that, but kind of in line with Commissioner Frybeck, are they really generating the tax returns that can pay for the expanse of materials that they need? When it comes to replacement time, if you have a 50,000 square foot warehouse on, you know, several acres, you've got a long utility expanse there. Does the tax benefits and economic benefits really pay for the expanse of that utility structure?
Good question. I think some of that answer is probably outside of my lane, but I will say, you know, from the utility side of things, it really kind of depends on how much water they're using, right? So, an industrial user uses a lot of water, and so that generates revenue to help offset their demands on the system. A warehouse development doesn't use a lot of water, and so you know, it's a different equation than if you've got a long pipeline just serving that development. Now, if it serves a lot of others, then that's, you know, a different equation that goes into it. I decided to throw that out there as kind of.
In terms of like even like pavement, for example, I don't remember what we have out kind of in the east side. We've got to do, not new at this point, but large development with warehouses and other facilities. There's a lot of pavement, there's a lot of sidewalk. Does that pay for itself in terms of maintenance costs over the time?
I don't think so. I mean,
Okay.
the existing system's not paying for itself, right? So additional, especially things like sidewalks and streets, like we're just not bringing in state gas tax revenue or any other revenues to cover the maintenance of that.
Yes.
Infrastructure.
Yeah. Okay, I'll stop at that point. Other questions before I go back to Commissioner Frybeck? Please, Commissioner Truman. I was hoping to tempt you into some questions.
Just some commentary. As a former food processor who used 2 million gallons of city water a day, I can assure you the city was getting a lot of revenue out of it.
We think.
Yes.
I do a lot of irrigation in the summer, so I feel the same way.
And one more thing, wastewater task force. I don't know if are those materials public or available, because it's enough information on the city's water system, infrastructure, forecast needs, seismic, all this stuff to run a course. So if it's available and you have questions, it's a great resource.
Yeah, Commissioner Chu is referring to our water and wastewater task force that advises the council on rate setting for the utilities. And we go through that process once every 2 years, have a series of meetings with those folks to talk about issues and the cost of service of the utility, and make a recommendation, or they make a recommendation to council about what the rate increase should or should not be. And that's where we present a lot of the information, just like he shared. Those meetings are publicly noticed and those materials are available, so I will make that link available to you all.
Thank you, and I'll have one more question here, and then I'll wrap up. So when we look at each kind of these utility provisions, we have, you know, drinking water, stormwater, wastewater, transportation system. In terms of the ability of those systems to pay for their own maintenance costs, not expansion, but their own maintenance costs, you know, how are each of them doing? Like, how would you rate them? Like, our drinking water really pays for itself. Our transportation system clearly does not. Like, where are we in terms of their ability to pay for themselves and maintenance?
Yeah, so water and wastewater are most closely linked because they basically work off the same rate structure.
Drinking water?
Yes, sorry. And I would say that stormwater has its own rate, right? So our utility funds are commingled. But those three, I think, are clearly the most stable and probably in the order that drinking water and wastewater, stormwater because of its own rate, and then transportation is clearly probably at the bottom. Parks is another one where there's healthy parks and SDC revenue right now to help build new facilities, but operations and maintenance is a challenge for the city, as has been in the news lately.
Thank you, Commissioner Brevet.
Yeah, just two more. So when we do our pavement R&R projects, because I understand that the Winter Street bikeway, that was an R&R project, right?
Are you talking about the Union Street?
Or sorry,
Yeah.
Union Street.
Yeah, the Winter Street is a future project, so it's the future. Yeah, we did do pavement R&R as part of that, but the focus of it was to create a different section there with the bike lanes. And then another part of pavement R&R is every time we replace pavement beyond its surface or skin patch, we're required to upgrade all the adjacent curb ramps to ADA standards. So you'll see that when we're doing our pavement jobs. That's why all the curb ramps get torn out and redone if they're old, because they need to be brought up to current standards. So that's all part of a pavement R&R project.
So when we're doing R&R projects, the city has its own transportation standards. And from what I understand, we don't necessarily, we can do like say a buffered bike lane on the street without buffered bike lanes, no problem with an R&R project, or maybe we could go the extra mile and like a concrete barrier or something to get kind of two birds with one stone. Is that kind of on the city's list of things to do, to kind of go beyond the standard in that sense? And then public outreach on those things, because I've got interests and stuff, so.
Yeah, absolutely. So with our R&R projects, we have definitely been looking for opportunities to make changes to the lane configurations to provide more room for bikes, especially. The thing we can't do within the budget of the project is move the curbs, because that's where the expense comes in, right? But what we can do is look at the way things are configured, make changes. So a couple of examples I'll give. The 2024 pavement R&R project from the bond that we just finished. We did a block on Liberty just right outside here, and then a large section of commercial way down in South Salem. And where we had the width on that section of commercial, we added some buffered bike lanes. And it varies out there because development has sort of happened in piecemeal patterns. So there's some wider sections and some narrower, but wherever we had the width, we narrowed the travel lanes a bit, still within our standards, and then added the buffer to the bike lanes. Out here, we were able to take away a little bit, a few parking spaces, and then add the green bike pump. So we looked for those things that we can do around the edges. A bigger thing that we're doing is with the 2025 pavement R&R project, which is out on Silverton Road. And there we're doing a full reconfiguration. So that roadway right now is 2 lanes in each direction. We're gonna narrow it down to a center turn lane, 1 travel lane in each direction, and that lets us bring in bike lanes, and in some cases, some buffers to make a little more room for the bicyclists out there. It's a pretty, if anybody who's driven that road knows the way that it's configured right now, it's kind of harrowing, especially for bicyclists. So those are some things that we're doing. The place to keep an eye on what's happening there is the bond oversight committee, so that we have a committee made up of counselors, the mayor, and a couple of citizen members, where we report out on all the bond projects every month and talk to them about those opportunities and get their buy-in on those changes that we're making. So that's the place to keep track of those things.
Okay, thank you. Oh yeah, I got one more. Sorry.
Oh, one more thing while I'm thinking on that last question, sorry. We also, as those projects are happening, we go out to the neighborhoods and have town hall meetings and that. So you hear about those things, in those neighborhood and town hall meetings.
Cool, and then I saw in your actions, you had some scoring criteria, I was wondering what those criteria are, and if they're different for each projects.
You take a shot at that one, Tammy, and I'll jump in.
Yes, I can actually send those to you if you would like, because I don't remember all of them off the top of my head. But transportation is different than the utility ones, and water and sewer are the same, but different than stormwater. So it's like asset criticality, economic development, all of the criteria have equity as part of them. I can't tell you off the top of my head the transportation ones, but they are different. So if you'd like, I can send those.
I think if Jennifer would be willing to send that around to all of us, that would be great.
Okay, I can do that,
I think they're included in the CIP document.
but they're all updated now.
Oh, that's right, we changed.
Yeah, we just updated.
We'll get you the updated list.
So,
Any final questions?
Thank you.
Okay, James, do you want to say anything? You haven't had a chance to say anything. I feel bad for you. You had to sit there.
That's quite all right.
Are you sure you can opine on anything, the budget? Oh, any thoughts you want to share tonight?
No, I will be at the budget committee presenting the CIP once it's fully done, so tune in.
All right, great. So do we lobby you then about our preferences?
Please don't.
Okay. All right, before we end this portion and move on, since Josh is here, does anyone actually have anything they would like to know about the budget? I think we have a rare opportunity to get some information. No, okay.
I have a question.
Go ahead, oh, please go ahead.
Or maybe Josh, I don't know. I know that, so the dwindling returns on the gas tax is a tale as old as the gas tax, and even ones for decades. Almost seems to be about it every 10 years when this comes up to the legislature. And I know that Justin and the city, that part of our legislative advocacy really is about revenue. I'll just exclusively about revenue this year. And so recognizing that infrastructure improvements are so grant driven and of course relying, as I said, less and less on gas tax. Is there any conversation about revenue in the legislature this year, given this is a big transportation year, around getting more revenue producing projects moving forward?
Yeah, pretty good question. I think yes. So we have a public works assistant director, Mark Bechtel. He served on the ODOT advisory committee, so he's involved in those conversations. I'm trying to think where he gave an update on that. I think it might have been at the legislative committee. So we can send you that date for when we gave that last update. But they are looking at different options, similar to other revenue issues. Now there's no easy win. There's no slam dunk. I know they're looking at some minor tweaks, especially like around EV charges. Right now they're actually paying less than their share based on their registration charges. But eventually, locally and for the state, we're gonna have to look at a different mechanism likely to fund that transportation system.
Wow. All right, I think we're gonna be over here in just a couple of minutes, so I'm wondering if the bond team would be willing to stay for just a few minutes after the meeting. So I think there are a couple other questions that I just don't merit everyone's, maybe someone's easy to do, but anyway. All right, so let me close this and turn it over to Lisa for administrative reports.
Great, just to go over the upcoming dates, we have just 2 resolutions to initiate a code amendment on March 4th. A reminder, we're gonna have our joint work session with the city council on March 17th at 6 o'clock here in council chambers. And Jen said everybody an appointment to go over the housing production strategy. We don't have any items for the meeting the next day, March 18th. And I don't know that staff's gonna have any, so let us know if you want us to cancel that meeting, since you'll have had to. And then April 15th meeting, we're gonna have 2 public hearings and 2 code amendments, and we're going to have our presentation from DAS staff on sustainability. And then Jen and I were wondering, were there other state staff coming, or DAS is presenting for all the state offices?
Yeah, I can answer that question. So DAS has taken the lead on that. So but they will be joined by ODOT and I think Chris's will also be joining.
That's all I have.
Any questions for Lisa? Okay, oh, should we cancel then the meeting? Is it what day is the third? Oh, it's the 13th. It's the
March 18th.
March 18th. Is there anyone dying to have a second meeting? Ben, you would like to have a second?
I was,
Mr. Private.
I was kind of interested in seeing if we could instead cancel the one on the fourth and do those items on the 18th.
If we could what?
Move the items on the fourth to the meeting on the 18th. I don't know what everybody's thoughts are on doing back-to-back meetings. But it's my partner's on anniversary on the fourth, and she was, you know, like, okay, like I understand you might have a planning commission meeting, but I was just wondering if it's possible.
If we don't have the resolutions that night, we will not be able to have the code amendment in April, and this is related to FEMA or on a timeline for it, so we have to initiate it. We can't start, there's a state requirement to send DLCD notice 35 days before we can have any public hearings, so we're trying to initiate it as soon as possible to start the 35-day notice. Essentially, you could just ask to be excused that night.
I'll see you guys.
I think we're all okay with giving you an excuse. Excused, you are excused.
Okay, cool. I will not see you guys before.
Oh, and I did wanna say, I just remembered that Fred was appointed to Luba, he was Senate confirmed. And his last day will be Friday, not heard. Who will be attending our meeting, so we will find out, and he couldn't come tonight, I'm sure he had to pick up his wife at the airport, and I said, well, who am I to tell you no, you no longer work here, so.
Very little authority.
Yes, exactly.
All right, any questions for Lisa? Any comments for the good of the order? All right, dismissed. You look at you go.